Hello guys, it is the most wonderful time of the year. Well, it almost is. It is the holiday season. The holiday season is upon us, and let's be honest, the holiday seasons are super stressful, but food should not be a part of that. So today's video is all about helping you learn to enjoy the holiday season with zero guilt. I asked you guys on Instagram what your biggest concerns were with holiday food guilt, and today I'm going to give you my advice on the top 10 that you submitted. We'll cover everything from comparing yourself and your food choices to other people's, having some of that food FOMO, not working out in a typical manner that you usually might, how to handle other people's comments and diet talk that you might hear, and lastly, we'll cover what to do if you already ate past fullness. So if you are ready to dive in and excited to hear more about this and how to not have guilt this holiday season, be sure to take a second and give this video a thumbs up and take a screenshot and share it on Instagram stories. Be sure to tag me at NoFoodRules so that I can see, because I love seeing you guys watching these videos. And I also kind of love seeing what you're doing while you're watching the videos. I'm typically baking. That's like my catch up on YouTube time, so I love hearing that. As always, guys, this video is for informational purposes only, and it is not meant to serve as nutrition or medical advice specific to you. If you do need medical advice related to any information covered in this video, be sure to reach out to your medical provider immediately. This video is provided as is with no representations or warranties expressed or implied. All right, let's get to it. So the first thing with this is that you can never know what someone else needs, like how much energy or what their cravings are. You can never know that. You also cannot know necessarily what they ate earlier in the day. Maybe they ate a lot earlier and they're just not hungry. And you also can't know what they might eat later on. Bottom line, comparing yourself and what you're eating and what choices you're making to someone else is really pointless, and it's only going to drive you insane. Like I said, we'll never know if someone is feeling super restrictive in what they're eating, or maybe they just, like I said, came from a large meal. It's like you only see a small glimpse of what the full picture is, right? So just keep that in your mind whenever you have those feelings of comparisonitis. You have to just stand by what feels good to you. Concern number 2 is all about not being hungry enough. So here's the deal with this one. You can eat even when you're not hungry. There is no shame in that. Honestly, sometimes we need to do that. It's called what I call practical hunger. You guys have probably heard me say this example before, but maybe you have a meeting or an event at a time where you usually have a meal, so you have to eat earlier when maybe you're not necessarily hungry. I know that can happen a lot during the holidays because we have like set times for eating specific meals, if it's a gathering or a party or whatnot. Intuitive eating is not the hunger and fullness diet. It does not mean that you can only eat when you're hungry, and if you're not hungry, then you don't eat. That is not what this is about at all. So first of all, there's no shame in that. Secondly, if you want to eat something and you're not necessarily hungry, maybe there's like a plate of cookies or some fudge or something out there that you want to have some of, there's no reason that you can't. What I say for this is just to stay present during this. Allow yourself to enjoy it. Take that piece of fudge, go for it, but stay present and ask yourself, how am I physically feeling during this? That kind of helps you prevent getting to the point where you're like, okay, I'm physically so uncomfortable because I'm stuffed. Sometimes that can help. And truly savor it. Notice the taste, the texture, all of it. Something that I also say is that there's no expectations for what you have to eat. Just because a certain amount of food is put on your plate doesn't mean that you have to finish it. I know for a long time, I used to feel this feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm not hungry enough, which is totally bogus, for dinner or for a meal. There's no portions that are predetermined for you. You get to decide that. So maybe you're not super duper hungry. You don't have to eat a full giant portion. Just listen to your body and what your body is telling you. You can still enjoy those foods in the moment, but kind of like I said, just stay present and notice, okay, am I approaching the point of discomfort? And we'll go over some ideas what to do if you really are starting to get to that discomfort, yet the food still looks good. So stay tuned for that. And if you get to the point where you're just like, I'm really not super hungry right now, you can always take some for later. I'll say that a couple times throughout this video because it's so important. One thing to kind of consider is, would a food be more satisfying if you were able to eat a larger portion when you are hungry? So sometimes that's where taking some for later, if you're like, I really want to eat this, but I don't want to feel physically uncomfortable right now, then you can take some for later, because notice that that's something that we want to take note of as we're working towards intuitive eating, is saying, when, based on my hunger levels, is it the most satisfying to me? And you'll probably notice that when we get super hungry, it's not super satisfying because we are like shoveling it down our mouths. And then when we are not necessarily hungry, it's not as satisfying because we're not looking for things to satisfy us, right? We're not super engaged in the food necessarily. It's kind of more of just the mind piece of it. So think about that. Last thing here is to not save up calories. You guys, don't do this. It will backfire and likely cause some food obsession. If you know you're headed to a party later in the day, do not try to force yourself to save up calories and not eat earlier in the day so that you will be super hungry when you get there. Because like I said, we want to avoid feeling super hungry because it's likely going to lead us to just shoveling it down. And A, that's likely to lead to overeating, and B, that's not satisfying, right? We're not enjoying the food that we want to. Okay, so now let's talk about feeling some FOMO with food. So maybe some of those seasonal dishes that you don't typically have a lot of times during the year, and you feel like, oh, this is my chance to eat it. So first of all, remember that you can eat when you are not feeling physically hungry. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The key is to kind of find a way to do it comfortably. One thing that I like to do here is to ask for different recipes. Hey, can I get that recipe so I can make some later? That way, one thing you can do is to plan that in so it doesn't feel more like this all or nothing thing, this now or never. There's nothing saying that you can't make sugar cookies in July, right? That is just our own rule that we're setting there. So if there's something that you're like, maybe I'm not necessarily hungry for it right now, but I feel like it's, I'm gonna have some FOMO if I don't eat it, take the recipe and make it next week, make it tomorrow, make it 3 months from now, and some of that FOMO will kind of start to dissipate. And again, kind of think about, when will this be the most satisfying to me? If I'm not hungry for it and it's just the FOMO that's kind of causing me to really want this food, will it taste better and be more satisfying when I'm at a place where I'm more able to enjoy it? You can even take that tip and not necessarily make the exact same recipe, but what about that recipe is drawing you toward it? So maybe it's a pumpkin pie and you decide to make some pumpkin oatmeal and make it like a pumpkin pie oatmeal. That's totally fine. That's kind of picking the piece that you want, whether it's the crunch factor of a salad or the buffalo chicken part, the buffalo-ness of a buffalo chicken dip. Maybe you then soak chicken in buffalo sauce and grill it. It doesn't necessarily have to be the exact recipe, but kind of the components that are really drawing you towards it. Or you could take some of the food and freeze it. No FOMO. Concern number 4 you guys have is what to do if you feel guilt for eating unhealthy food. You guys know food is not healthy or unhealthy. It's all just food with varying degrees of nutrition for our bodies, nutrition for our souls. It's all fine, but you know what I mean. So there's something called the French paradox, and they talk about this in the intuitive eating book. And it's basically that the relationship with food and the attunement is more important than the actual food itself in order to be healthy. I know it's crazy, but it's true. And remember, we're on this earth to enjoy food. All foods, right? Like I said, even if a food isn't necessarily as rich in nutrients for our bodies, it might foster your soul more than that nutrient part. And that's okay. That's part of enjoying life. Also, remember that if you're worried about the health aspect of it, nutrition is not a meal-by-meal thing or even a day-by-day thing. It's a long-term thing, and I don't even mean like seasonally thing. Like, we are going to probably eat more quote-unquote treats or some of those less nutrient-dense foods, some more of those play foods during the holiday season, and that's okay. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to automatically become unhealthy. Actually, stressing about that food is going to raise your cortisol, which isn't great for your health. So instead, just enjoy it. You deserve it. Number 5 that you guys were concerned about is how to prepare for an event. So we kind of touched on this, but I really, again, do not recommend saving up calories. I know calories and nutrition in our heads for most of us have just turned into like a mathematical equation and like Tetris where we try to fit it all together, and that's just not how it works. If we save the bulk of our food for the evening, it's likely, like I said, going to backfire, because whenever we allow ourselves to get way hungry, we're going to wind up likely overeating because we're not able to listen to our bodies and our cues, because we're just basically inhaling our food without even tasting it. So not only are you probably going to wind up feeling physically uncomfortable, you're not going to enjoy the food that we've been actually looking forward to actually enjoying, right? So what I recommend, if you, like I said, maybe you have a holiday dinner or a party you're going to, just eat normally throughout the day. Yes, you can take into account something like, oh, we're having our dinner meal in a couple of hours and I'm kind of hungry now. Maybe then you have a snack to hold you over versus like a full large meal. Yes, you can take those things into account, but don't say, I am kind of hungry now, so I'm just gonna wait till I get there. One thing I always do is kind of ask myself, okay, you know, how hungry would I be when I get there? And then, like I said, we want to avoid getting too hungry. So if you think about it, be like, oh my gosh, I would be starving by the time I got there. Probably best to have a snack before. If you know that a big event is coming or meal, you can use mantras and affirmations to kind of psych yourself up and get yourself in the right mindset so that you are excited to enjoy the food and that you're in a guilt-free mindset. I deserve to nourish my body. No matter how my body might change based on what I eat, I am still me. We only have one life to live and food is meant to be enjoyed. I deserve that. What I eat does not depend on what I ate or what I might eat. I can listen to my body. I can eat these foods whenever I want. It's not an all or nothing now or never. Another thing you can do is to journal about how you want the event to go and how you want to enjoy it. Kind of do a little bit of like visualization there. Thoughts become actions, guys. So put your thoughts onto paper, cement them, and let it happen. Concern number 6 that you guys had was the guilt that we feel over not working out or not working out to the same degree or in the same manner as we usually would. So for this, what I recommend is to honestly take a hard look at why you're working out in the first place. Are you doing it because it's something that you enjoy, or are you shitting yourself and doing that because, again, you feel like you should and you're just doing it because you think that is what makes someone healthy? Working out or moving our bodies should be joyful. And if it's not, you don't need to force yourself to do that. And what you find joyful might be totally different from someone else. And it does not even have to be actual like workout at the gym exercises or videos. It could be cleaning the house. It could be going to the grocery store. Anything that's active is considered movement. I think that's a very important thing to note. Especially those who are running around with kids all day. That's like an all-day workout, even though you might not necessarily think it is because it's not the traditional type of movement. Another thing to take note of with working out is if you can't miss a day or 2 days or a week or even longer without worrying about your body changing or having your body change drastically, then maybe you're not at your set point weight and you're forcing your body to be something that it doesn't want to be. Hard thing to think about, but it's true. The 7th concern is how to say no to foods that you don't like. So I think one important thing here is to know your situation. So for instance, you might handle the situation one way if you are with your mother-in-law and you don't like the food, but you might handle it a different way if you are with some random coworker that you don't necessarily know. You feel me? And let's just note that this is not to be used if a food is a food rule for you. You really have to kind of be honest with yourself and say, I genuinely don't like this food. Like they're serving me a pie that I don't like or I'm allergic to. Could happen. One thing that you could do is to take some of the dish to split with someone else who does like it. That way there's not that pressure on you. That's so sweet of you. Hey, Susan, you want to split this? You could ask to take some home for later and give it to someone else who would enjoy it. That's so sweet of you. Could I take some to take home? Or you could say that you're satisfied. I'm actually satisfied right now, but I will take that recipe so I can make it later. The 8th concern you guys had was, how do you stay mindful when you're eating in a social situation? So what I recommend is and what I do is to just check in with myself and just ask, how does the food that I'm eating right now taste? What are the textures that I'm feeling? You can do that while still being socially engaged. Sometimes we also kind of feel like hype up what mindful eating really is into this big thing, that it has to be this big ordeal where we are like so laser concentrating on your food and we almost create it into a food rule. It just means being present with the experience. So I'd caution you to not kind of put too much pressure on that mindful piece. Just kind of, like I said, notice things. Even just doing something like that is going to allow you to better listen to your body and understand hunger, fullness, and satisfaction. All right, guys, we're getting there. Number 9, this is a big one. How do you deal with family members, comments, and diet talk? If you'll be in a situation where this might happen, I really do suggest trying to handle it before, if you can, and having a discussion with them. Whether it's the people or the people you're going with, just try to talk it out first and avoid the situation altogether. I also recommend having a couple comments or comebacks ready to go if diet talk does happen. Here are a couple of my favorites. You could make a joke out of it. I'm on the seafood diet. I see a food, I want it, I trust my body to eat it. My only food rule is I don't eat food that's poisoned. You could also try to change the subject and find other ways to connect, because a lot of times when people engage in diet talk, sometimes it is just because they want to bond and connect with you. And they think it's universally accepted. Totally not. Thank goodness for the intuitive eating movement, but some people still think it is. And these are a couple of my ways to do that. How's work going for you? Any big projects you're working on? How are the little ones doing? They must be getting so big now. And aren't you just the sweetest little puppy? I'm so ready for the warm weather, Karen. I cannot wait to go kayaking again. What are you looking forward to? And lastly, if you feel open to it and ready for it, you could choose to educate and inform someone, but know that it is not your responsibility, as hard as this sounds, to save someone from diet culture. Yes, you can, like I said, educate and inform, but we also have to put our own oxygen masks on before we can help other people. So don't put that burden on yourself. Sometimes we have to work through it ourselves, and just sharing your experience and what you do know can be helpful. So here are a couple ideas for that. I totally used to feel that way too, but then I discovered intuitive eating. Have you heard of it? Did you know that dieting is actually a predictor of weight gain and weight cycling, which not so great for our health? I'm totally all about health, but did you know that thinner doesn't actually mean healthier? Have you ever heard of health at every size? It's honestly fascinating. So happy I came across it. Makes so much sense. And lastly, number 10 was, how do you stop feeling guilty because you already ate past fullness? What do you do in that instance? So for this, remember that eating past fullness is normal. Intuitive eating is not the hunger and fullness diet. It does not make you a bad person that you ate past fullness, or it does not mean that you failed at intuitive eating. It just means you enjoyed an experience of life. You could also use some mantras and affirmations here to remind yourself that you're more than your body, you're more than your food choices, and you deserve to enjoy that. Don't let yourself just kind of sit there and loathe over feelings of feeling guilty, because if you can target those thoughts, you can then change your emotions and your actions. But if we just almost stew in those feelings of guilt, then you're going to feel crappy and you're probably going to just kind of wallow. Start with those thoughts. As hard as it seems, and as I kind of believe in fake it till you make it, guys. Not kind of, I do believe in it. Use those mantras and affirmations and say, I'm believing what I'm telling myself right now. You'll notice a drastic difference in your just demeanor after you start to use those. Also, if you did eat past fullness, remind yourself not to intentionally cut back on food. Like we talked about with kind of saving up calories, how we don't want to do that. Same thing here, you don't want to intentionally cut back on food, because that's likely just going to allow you to enter the restriction cycle and go from kind of swinging from one end of the scale, the hunger scale, to the other, cutting back and not eating, and then you're gonna get hangry, and then you're gonna get super full. And then you do the same thing. It's just a pendulum that a lot of times just swings back and forth. You still deserve to eat regardless of what you are eating, what you ate, or what you may eat in the future. Now you guys know I'm also big on journaling, so what I'd recommend doing if you are feeling guilty because you did eat past fullness is to journal out your thoughts. And what I mean by this is just simply write them down and acknowledge them and say, which of these are true, which of these are helpful for me, and which are not, which of these thoughts am I going to decide to let go? Are you saying, I'm such a bad person because I ate past fullness? That's not true. That thought is not a truth. What is a truth? Then write that down and say, yes, I ate past fullness. I'm feeling full right now, but I enjoyed that. That's true. One of you guys also said the phrase kind of along the same lines, what do you do when you have a food hangover? I loved that phrase, food hangover. And bottom line, like I said, don't restrict yourself. But what you can do in these instances are pay attention to what sounds satisfying to me. You might notice that you start to gravitate towards certain types of foods. And this is again why we want to learn how to listen to our bodies, because they will give us these cues. For me, I know if I eat super heavy foods or I'm going out to eat a lot or whatever it is, a lot of times after time goes on, a day, 2 days, I'm like, I just want a freaking veggie. That will happen. Your body will start to guide you. Or take note, do you want something light and crisp, or do you want something warm? You know, take note of those things and let that be your guide, okay? Be flexible with what you decide to eat. It might look different based on what your body's telling you, based on kind of that food hangover and maybe what those foods were comprised of or the types of foods. But bottom line here is do not restrict intentionally. You might notice that maybe you don't have as much hunger. That's okay. Maybe you have the same amount of hunger, more hunger. It doesn't matter as long as we're following our body. But they will give us those cues if we start to learn to pay attention to them. And another thing here with those food hangovers is to remember that there's no expectations for you, okay? A lot of times we set these expectations for ourselves and say, this is what dinner looks like. These are the portions that I usually eat at dinner. There's nothing saying that you can't adjust those based on what your hunger and fullness is. That is really important to kind of remember. Just because you plate something doesn't mean that that is what you have to eat. That's a food rule. That's kind of like a habit that we've created. You determine your portion sizes, not the plate, not the server. You do. All right, guys, I hope this video was super helpful for you and you can take just even a couple nuggets of what we talked about today and implement it to enjoy your holiday season more, because to be honest with you, I feel like so many of the holidays that I had when I was wrapped up in diet culture, I honestly don't remember because I was so focused on the food, and that it makes me so sad to think about, and I do not want that for anyone else. So take this and just remember you're more than your food choices. You're more than what your body looks like, and you deserve to enjoy every ounce of life because we only have one. So be sure that if you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe down there. It really does help me to continue making more videos for you. And with that, I will see you guys next week with another video. And I have had this eggnog sitting here the whole time. I was gonna sip it during it, and I just got too excited and too wrapped up in giving advice. So I'm gonna go enjoy this, and I'll see you guys next week.